The Oracle of Luna is a podcast with me, Bridget Engels, as your host. Here we have conversations with real live, present-day goddesses who are actively and courageously doing their magical work in the world. Each episode is a bewitching journey with relevant discussions on topics such as Wiccan pagan spirituality, writing, culture, magical practices, art, ritual, and the craft in its many forms. Welcome to the Oracle of Luna. Today we have Diana Law, herbalist and plant medicine expert and druidess. Welcome, Diana.
Thank you, Bridget. I'm so glad to be here.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. How did you choose to become an herbalist and plant expert?
Well, I've always had chronic kind of illnesses that Western medicine didn't seem to have answers for. And I love plants. And if you put those things together, you get herbal medicine.
Yeah.
People have worked with plants for health since forever, right? Before we had Western, more like pharmaceutical medicine, people always used plants.
Yes.
And I love that we have this way of managing our own health with our plant allies. From preventative immune building, tongue twist there, from preventative immune boosting to diminishing illness symptoms to easing chronic conditions. Plants are really there for us.
Yes, absolutely.
There's so much that we can do. You know, if you really have to go to a doctor, you have to go to a doctor, but there's a lot that we can do at home, like in our kitchen.
Yeah, today I'm making a healthy kale soup, and I added garlic and onion and a lot of fresh herbs and organic kale. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, it sounds delicious.
Yeah. And since the weather's getting cold and we're heading into the Yule season, I think it's really important to, like you say, just boost your immunity, especially what's going on in the world today with COVID. And plant medicine is becoming really kind of a really important way to take charge of our health.
Yeah, you know, typically when the seasons change is when people get sick a lot too, because it's like a change for your body and it has to get used to it. So all
Yeah.
those immune boosting things like garlic and hot soups, those are really great.
Yeah, absolutely. So who has influenced you the most on your journey?
Oh gosh, that's so hard to pick because there are so many amazing people out there these days.
Yeah.
I've studied under some people. So I've studied under Suzanne Jordan, she's gotten married and her last name is different now, and I forgot what it was. But I've studied under Matthew Wood. I've studied with Michael and Leslie Tierra. That's more like a Chinese medicine slant. And I love the science end of herbalism, which all of those people had some background in.
Uh-huh.
But I also feel like traditional herbalism is a really rich source of information, like how to work with the plants, whether with European uses or like native ones for the land, because we live here.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I like to honor the native people.
Right.
Where I live wasn't traditionally anyone's home, but it was like a fishing grounds for the Duwamish and the Muckleshoot, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I worked as a gardener at the botanical medicine department for a while at Bastyr University. I learned a lot there.
Right.
It's a natural medicine university in case people
Yes,
aren't
it's
familiar.
wonderful. It's a wonderful community resource and fantastic college. A lot of great speakers and teachers and you know natural medicine experts work and teach there. So that's amazing. What a great education.
Yeah, I lectured there during their health. They have a health festival every year. It's usually in June.
Oh,
It's open to the public and it's
uh-huh.
free. And they have speakers and all kinds of stuff going on, like a little marketplace and stuff. They didn't have it this year,
Oh,
of course.
yeah.
But they've had some really great speakers in there, like Rosemary Gladstar and like some of the big people. And they also have, where I worked was a separate part of the campus that's the medicinal gardens, and they've got like every kind of medicinal plant you can think of in
Oh,
there.
okay.
And that's open to the public, and all the plants pretty
Right.
much have signs so you can see what they are. And that's a really nice place to visit if you're in the
Yeah.
Seattle
I
area.
would love to go visit that. And like you said, it's free of charge. It's open to the public.
Yeah, the garden is always open. And then the health fair that they have is usually in like beginning of June, end of May.
Do you know the name of it or the name of that fair?
Uh, health and shoot. I don't remember
That's okay.
exactly. I should know after working there and being there and all that stuff, but
Well, that's yeah, Bastyr is an amazing resource and community, great community and a great university. And it's right here in the Puget Sound, so pretty awesome.
yeah, okay. I looked it up while you were talking. It's the annual Urban Food Fair.
Okay, okay, great. Yeah, well, maybe this in 2021 it'll be open for everybody to go see
Uh,
that and experience
yeah,
it.
I really hope that we're past this pandemic by then.
Yes, I know. Me too. So you are a very prolific plant medicine teacher and expert. What inspires you to do all this?
Well, I really love what I do, from growing plants to making remedies, and I really love teaching people, like
Yeah.
seeing those light bulbs go off over their heads. That's really fun for me. Even just getting people connected to nature. Um,
Yeah.
you just watch them blossom into it, and
Uh,
there's
yeah.
always more to learn. It's one of those like rabbit hole kind of things to get into because there's just always more.
Yeah,
Uh,
and it looks from what like your Instagram posts that you are really you've got a good group usually on all your workshops and classes, and regardless of the pandemic you've got a good turnout, so kudos to you. And you know, I've always honored anybody who has a really close alliance with plants and nature. It's just so important and sacred, and um, you know, balancing. It puts us in touch with the seasons, the land, the nature spirits, and the goddess within. So, um, anyway, um,
plants have a really vibrant living force.
yes,
Like you can definitely feel that when you connect with them.
yeah,
Another thing that I do is I volunteered and worked for the Beacon Food Forest the last several years.
great.
That's
And
given me, go
where
ahead.
where is that, Diana? What part of Seattle is that in?
So that's on Beacon Hill. It's on the southeast corner of 15th Avenue and Dakota Street.
Okay, and is
Um,
that open to the public?
That is open to the public, and the model there is open harvest for the most part. So anybody can come in and gather things. There is some pea patch area. So in the spots you see that are like little, they look like little squares, like somebody's garden plot, they are someone's garden plot. So you
Okay.
don't want to pick there, but the whole rest of the garden, which is a lot, is open. And there's just like an incredible variety of plants, from like fruit trees to seasonal vegetables to native wetland has been put in, medicinal plants. There's just like all kinds of plants there.
Yeah. And it's all partitioned off. So it's kind of, you know, vegetables are here, fruit here, or is it all mixed in together?
Um, it's we kind of started out that way, but lately it's been a little more all mixed together. So our next step is we really need to work on signs so that people understand what they're looking at.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
Um,
to make it self-guided.
yeah, so it's a little more user friendly for people who don't know that many plants.
Uh-huh.
Um, David Parasso, who has been doing the wetlands, has taken what was just a swampy piece of grass and put in all kinds of native plants for crafts. So you can get stuff for basketry.
Oh,
Um,
wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really fun. And it's a really diverse neighborhood. So we've tried to be inclusive in how we organize, like what we plant there. So we try to have like a variety of things from like Asian to African to Native, like to try to get a little bit of something for everybody in there.
Sure, sure. Um, yeah, that sounds like a really interesting space. And the fact that it's working with the native plants and the community, and has they have you as a as an expert there working. That's amazing. That's really cool.
Yeah, we have a lot of people that are experts. Like I was saying, David Parasso, he's worked with a lot of Native groups. We have Natalie Hammerquist is working with me on our little medicinal area. She's another local herb teacher that people might know.
Okay.
She runs Adiantum School.
Oh.
And Keith Keith Posse, he works at UW at their garden. So we've got a lot of people who can tell you a lot about the plants if you're out there. Just ask whoever's around, and they probably know quite a bit.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I'd love to go check it out someday. And it's all on a volunteer basis, correct?
Pretty much. We have one employee, which is not enough to organize all that because, as you can imagine, with volunteers, it gets a little chaotic.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but me and Natalie were offered a space to grow medicinal plants, and we took it so that we can teach our classes out of there. So we can grow stuff, and it's easily accessible for people to go back to and gather, but it's
Right.
also a teaching space.
So what maybe give us an example or a few examples of the type of medicinal plants you have in your plot there.
So we have Ladies Mantle, which is great for um, female bodies.
Yeah.
I'm probably not saying that right
Yeah.
with the genders. Um, we have Grandilia, which is great for like lung issues and dampness and phlegm. That's a native plant.
Hmm.
Um, I just planted sweetgrass, which is really sacred.
Yes.
We did a little ceremony when we planted it to
Oh,
to
did
ask
you?
it to work with us and bless it. Yeah,
Oh, that's fantastic.
yeah.
So, wow. So and that kind of leads me to my next question is kind of the more spiritual aspect of plant medicine is, um, do you believe that there's plant and nature spirits, and how does your herbalism practice integrate with your spiritual path as a druid or pagan?
Well, I mean, druids are kind of pagan, so.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I totally believe in nature spirits. Plants are living things, so they have their own spirit and energy. And I would even go as far as saying, they kind of have like devas, like intermediary
Yeah.
spirits
Yeah.
that work with all the plants. Anyone who stood in a forest or like at the top of a mountain and looked out, I would think you could say like you can feel that living force, right? That power.
Absolutely.
Um,
If you can tune in and quiet the mind, yes, there's great energy.
yeah. And I like talk to plants and I try to listen to what they have to say, and you have to slow yourself down, like especially with something like a tree, like their energy is so much slower. You have to like sit and be receptive and take some time.
Yeah.
I've also studied with fairy tradition, so I
Yeah.
can see that
Right.
connection.
Yeah.
Um, which it's not that far from druidry. I
Right.
guess I'm a bit of a polymath. Like I take a little bit of this and that, but
Yeah. Yeah. Well, having a connection with nature is kind of spans on throughout most religions or most spirituality forms of spirituality, but I would say Wiccans, Druids, and pagans really incorporate that connection to nature and being part of nature and viewing nature as sacred is really ingrained in all those traditions. So yeah, so being a druidess yourself, do you like to do ceremonies out in the woods and forest?
I do. Working with like the energy of the plant is a big part of my path. So
Right.
um, when you look at like the indigenous practices of most areas, like there's a lot of similarities. Like Native people sing to their plants or offer them gifts. I find that in my own background, even though it wasn't necessarily formally talked about. My European ancestors who were really a long line of agricultural people. I remember my father and my grandfather like bursting into song for everything they did.
Uh, that's interesting. What's your background or what's your heritage? Just out of curiosity.
Mostly Irish, Scottish, a
Okay.
little bit of German, and actually a fair amount of Native American. But I didn't grow up on a reservation, and like those traditions weren't really passed down. And I'm very white presenting, so
Yeah.
mm,
Right.
I like to honor that part of my ancestry, but I don't like make any claims to that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Um,
But it's interesting you bring up the singing to the plants and as a form of honoring and giving back and having a connection. I think that's fascinating.
yeah, like in the peasantry in Europe, you see a lot of those nature practices that were held longer. And singing, it was a big part of their daily life. Like you find a lot of things around farming and cooking and like working wool. They had the walking songs where they would,
Right. Right.
all work together and sing at the same time.
Right.
And a lot of us have lost those traditions because, assimilating into American culture. But I
Yeah.
suspect it's similar in a lot of cultures. Like, even though it's not talked about, like these were our traditions, I just remember a lot of things that were done naturally in the family, like singing or
Hmm.
always having a garden and that sort of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. And even with the crafts, getting back to the crafts and working with nature, the basketry weaving or the knitting, even knitting or
Yeah.
weaving from a loom or spinning thread, wool, all
Well, it's interesting because spinning thread is one of the oldest technologies of humanity. Like they have found drop spindles
yes.
for fabric way before written history.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And that really ties in with women's work and women's spirituality.
Yeah.
It's really very, very interesting. And yes, it dates back to ancient times. And some of the earliest forms of female deity are linked to spinning.
Yeah. And you'll see in a lot of cultures too, like myths around spiders, like where people have interacted with a goddess or a grandmother or whatever. Um, it's a spider, and spiders, kind of weave.
Yeah.
Like they say, your whole life is woven into, a skein.
Right. Right.
So yeah, that's really fascinating.
Huh. Yeah. And I often think back then in the ancient times, ancient civilizations were so reliant on the seasons and nature and whether there was going to be enough food to get through the year, and really the just having to plan and work with the plant and animal allies. It was certainly quite, I'm sure it's an intense activity. One.
Yeah, and I mean, also with the seasons of the year, like if you're working along with the seasons of the year, you're going to tend to be a little healthier because you're
Yeah.
like in tune with what you need right now.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and I mean, you can kind of do that out of like a grocery store, like only buying the things that are in season. Most of us kind
Yeah.
of go beyond that, but if you look at the types of things that would be available, like you want leafy greens in the spring because you just went through winter and you need all that fresh, like phytochemistry in your body. Or in the fall, you want like root vegetables, and that's what you would have been harvesting,
Yeah.
because you want to ground and kind of get more like substantial nutrition going.
Yeah. Yeah. And I wonder if a part of that was just really intuitively working with what was available in the type of environment that your community, was living in at the time. And, certainly in parts of Asia or even here in America, it was pretty lush. There was a lot of variety. But I imagine in some desert societies, there was really not a lot to really live on.
Well, there probably was more than we realize now.
Really?
Um, because people, that's what they had to live on. And so they were a lot more, they knew a lot more of their local plants and things.
Yeah.
Like even like I'm so into plants now, like if I go out in the forest, I could find a few things to eat, but I probably couldn't get through a whole winter on that. Like,
Right.
they would have known, they weren't living in these little boxes where they were separate from everything. And
Right.
they would have had to know those things.
Yeah. And really rely on community and, probably a lot of like what you do, volunteers and group activities to gather and find the plants and medicinals that they needed. It's I guess I'm just kind of getting back to the whole community aspect of plants.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Like, you often see a lot of festivities around certain gathering times,
Right.
where they would have been. Like, I know I watched a whole show on gathering Scotch broom for making fabric, before they were going to weave it. There was a whole
Yeah.
process of like gathering it and then like stomping on it in the river. And they were like, they would have the young people like dance on it. And it would be a big festivity, but it was
Yeah.
practical. They were making something that they were going to
Right.
need so that they could clothe themselves.
Right. And even like just candle making or wine making, it's kind of goes back to community and group activity.
Yeah, they've come out now and said that, it wasn't so much survival of the fittest, it was like small groups of people working together that made it.
Right. Right. And that is spiritual as well as necessary for survival, but it's all kind of integrated, working with nature, working with humans, and really honoring the spiritual aspect of the deity within nature and in humans. It's all
Yeah. And I think people have forgotten that they're part of nature. Like it's not like there's nature and then humans are some separate thing. We're
right.
actually, part of this world. So, um,
Yeah.
and likewise, we want to give reciprocity to the plants. Like you don't just want to go out and like be hacking at things and taking what you need. You want those plants to be there next year. So,
Right. Right. And that kind of leads me into the next question I'm going to ask. How do you see plant medicine and herbalism evolving in the future?
So, it's hard to say what the future is going to be, but
Yeah.
plant medicine and herbalism are gaining in popularity. People are looking for more natural alternatives. There's a lot of people combining herbalism and spirituality because that was always part of healing in the past.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. When you talk about spirituality and herbalism, are you talking about forms of, let's say, a shamanism type of experience?
It could be. It can also just be like we were talking about before, like talking to the plants. Like if you're going to gather something, you ask permission and then
Mhm.
you meditate and wait to hear what the answer, and you'll get an impression. Like it's not a voice coming out of the sky, but you'll have a definite feeling of like yes or no. And I try
Ah,
to honor that.
like a gut
Um,
feeling, intuitive feeling.
right. And that's kind of, I guess, my thing more on the
Yeah,
druid end is that sort of back and forth. I know a lot of people use plants in ceremonies, like
sure,
they're going to use sage or something to clear the energy of the space,
sure,
that sort of thing,
sure.
which is a
Or
little bit different.
sweet grass.
Sweetgrass, and hopefully you honor the plant by getting it from a
Right.
good source
A good
that's
start.
not
Right.
just not taking it out of nature and diminishing what's out
Right.
there.
So
Um,
let's talk about permaculture. We know that permaculture is growing in popularity, and it's the whole basis is to pretty much growing based on native techniques and to give back to the land and grow food in a more sustainable way. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah, so permaculture is a system of growing on the land based on a lot of native techniques from all over the world that have been distilled into an approach that people can use to grow food in a more sustainable way. So, permaculture is kind of short for permanent culture. Like, you're not just using the land intensively and then moving to a new spot. You're like keeping the fertility in the land. You're using perennial plants that come back every year.
Uh-huh.
Um, and then a lot of people now are moving beyond that into regenerative agriculture, which doesn't just sustain like what we're already like how we're already farming, but
Uh,
helps repair some of the damage that's been
interesting.
done.
Interesting. Is that
So
um, nutrients back into the soil?
yeah, that's one way you can do that. Like instead of gathering all your leaves and throwing them in the trash, you like put them over your garden beds and let them
Right.
decay and add value to your land.
It's kind of like
Um,
compost. Would you call that composting?
yeah. Uh-huh.
Okay.
I know I have I have a few compost bins, and
Yeah.
at the end of the year, I take all that material out and put it on my garden beds and help build the soil back up.
Right. So the
Um,
idea is to really give back to the soil what you've taken out of it.
yeah, and hopefully repair some of the damage that's been done. Like, they've done so much logging, like putting more trees back
Yeah.
out in a natural way, not in a tree farm way.
Yeah.
I have neighbors that use Roundup, even though I've tried to talk to them.
Oh no.
So, you
Oh.
know,
uh,
just try to like make my yard as welcoming for the bees and things so they're not over in the other yard getting
right.
nasty stuff. If I'm out in the forest, like I do wildcrafting, so I will go out and if I'm gathering something, I pay attention to how much there is. If there's not very much, I'm not going to take it.
Yeah.
And even if I am gathering something, like I will try to, shake the branch or the mushroom and spread the spores or the seeds so that I'm
Oh,
helping the plant propagate,
oh, that's
back into.
wonderful. Yeah, to kind of give back to the land what you've taken, and as a way of honoring the sacrifice of that plant.
Yeah, and it's kind of like being a good steward, or
Yeah.
being a friend, like
Yeah. And that kind of ties back with the whole patriarchal capitalist society philosophy of exploitation. We are about respect and not exploitation.
right. And I think in some ways Europe is a little bit ahead of us on that because they ran out of room a long time ago and they've had to like face some of these things like garbage or
Yeah.
um and we've just kind of like felt like we had all this land,
Right.
and it's like, well, there isn't a limit to that, so we want to start putting
Right. Taking
putting
care of our land resources and our plant
right,
resources and
because
forest
we don't
resources.
have another planet to go to, so at
Right.
least not yet. So
That's right. And also we have to feed the world. So that's really important, is to take care of the soil and make sure that we are not decimating or ruining the soil and
yeah, definitely.
for future crops. So
Yeah, because we're
yeah,
gonna want to eat again next year.
exactly. Exactly.
And sometimes you have to pull weeds or you've got a tree for whatever reason, you need to take it down. And you can try to use some nonviolent communication to talk to the plant and like tell it why why you're pulling it or what you're doing. And, you're still going to end up doing it, but I think it does improve the energy in the land. Um, when you try to approach the plants and explain what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I learned that from Marianne Bertel Vaughn at Fairy Congress. She has a book called Over the Rainbow that talks a lot about how to use nonviolence in your garden because you do have to like weed and things.
Yeah, sure. And what is Fairy Congress?
Fairy Congress is an event. Of course, it didn't happen this year, like a lot of things.
Yeah.
But it happens over in the Methow Valley. usually. Sometimes it moves around.
Okay.
It was started, I think, by Michael Pilarski, who has started a million things. And I think it's a different group now running it. But they bring in all kinds of people who are experts on different things of the way of the fairies. Uh,
Uh-huh.
and so it's kind of like a convention, except you're camping.
Yeah.
And it's really fun. There's some really interesting people talking about from working with your spirit animals to land spirits, Sasquatch. There's just all kinds of stuff.
Oh, fascinating. And what time of the year is that?
That's usually in August to September.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
there's just people, playing flutes and just
Oh,
dressing up like fairies. And they have all these really fun events that go on there. I had a lot of fun with that.
probably
Yeah.
some music and dance going on as well, and
Yeah.
merrymaking.
Really fun event.
Oh, that's cool. Um, so it looks like we're kind of getting to the end of things here. So what are some of your upcoming workshops and classes or plans for the future, Diana?
Well, and after that, I wanted to talk about some actual like specific plants a little bit,
Okay.
because I think we still have a little bit of time. Um, so upcoming, I have quarterly classes next year combining herbalism, bushcraft, plantcraft, and spirituality.
Okay.
And I also have like single classes that I offer sometimes, on a specific topic, or, I might be doing more online classes because we
Yeah.
seem to be going backwards with the
Right.
virus again.
Right.
So I may introduce some kind of quarterly class on Zoom. I'm gonna have
Okay.
to figure out exactly what that looks like.
Yeah. So some of
Um,
these are in person with you that people would go to, say, to your website to look at a list of your classes and then just sign up that or register that way.
yeah, I have a more detailed description of what we do on my
Okay.
website.
Okay. And you also do video. I noticed on Instagram you post some live video feeds.
Yeah, I've been trying to do some mini classes on Instagram on Tuesdays. I need to get more consistent with my time frame, but um, even if you don't make it to the exact class, like it's on my IGTV thing, so
Yeah.
you can always see those. So
Right.
I'll
Yeah.
they're short, but they're informational. Sometimes they're on gardening, sometimes they're on herbalism,
Uh-huh. And
sometimes they're
do your classes, Diana, go year round, or are they mostly in the spring and summer, or when there's sun out here?
I try to go all year because I think it's really good to
Yeah.
learn about the plants at different times of the year.
Right.
They have different medicine at different times of the year, and it's also good to learn how to ID plants by seeing them at different parts of the year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's really important to know what plant you're working with,
Yeah.
and that can be hard to do from online or from a book. So I like working in person, but I might have to come up with some kind of hybrid thing.
Yeah.
Pandemic, but
Sure.
it's Seattle. Like being in nature means sometimes you're cold and wet. And
Yeah.
actually, those are like people's favorite classes. Like they're not happy at the beginning of the day, but by the end of the day, they like feel like a warrior, I guess. I don't know.
Uh,
That's usually their favorite classes that they ended up doing. So,
that's awesome.
um, yeah. Um, and there's a lot of things going on, even in the winter, like poplar buds or
Uh-huh.
different things, tree resins.
And
So,
you mentioned that you work with textiles for basketry and certain plants for basket weaving and dye and woodworking. Are those also kind of in the middle of winter, some of those classes?
yeah, so some of those don't have to be outdoors necessarily. Although, you can put up a tent, and like indigo, I'd probably rather do outside because it's a little messy.
Yeah.
But I'm really been getting into plant dyes lately. So,
Oh,
yeah, that's definitely going to be part of the course.
that kind of that reminds me of just something I saw, some show. It was about again, back to the female centric weaving and dyeing and candle making and food production. It seemed like dye working with dyes and dyeing fabric and wool thread, that was also really a ceremonial spiritual experience as well.
Yeah, you can take a lot of plants and make some kind of dye with them. So you could wear clothes that have like the energetic medicine of whatever plant you're trying to work with medicinally, like that's one way it could hybridize.
What's
Uh,
a plant? What's an example of a plant that you make dye with?
so I just did black walnut, which black walnut plant you can use like to get rid of parasites and fungus and that sort of thing. So energetically, if you were dyeing cloth with it, if you've been having trouble with energetic attachments, poor
Mm.
boundaries and things, you could use that to kind of try to cleanse a little bit. Um,
I'm assuming that's the color black in the end.
Um, Not really. It's more of a medium brown. I keep trying to get a darker dye out of that plant, but as many tannins as it has, it just doesn't seem to create. I mean, the water's super dark, but getting it to stick to things
Uh-huh.
seems to be
That
hard.
sounds kind of like a long process to get dye from a plant or
It
black.
is more of a process. There are a few things that you can do, like in a few hours, where you just boil it and you put cloth in, and it's great. But usually it takes a little bit longer than that.
Uh-huh.
A little
But
more.
again, it's a ceremony. It sounds like a ceremonial almost.
Yeah, you're putting your intention in there, by staying with it. So.
Exactly. And you're working with the plant and you're seeing a result, and you can wear that plant and take on the energy of that plant like you were alluding to before.
Right. Um, One of the plants I'm working with now, and it's not a dye plant, but more medicinal, is mugwort.
Yeah.
And we're kind of in that like dark part of the year, like you
Right.
have with the moon, with the new full, and
The
that
moon
whole
phase.
cycle.
Yeah.
We're kind of like entering the new moon
Mm-hmm.
section of the year.
Yep.
Um, so mugwort is a great plant, both magically and herbally. Um, it's a plant people use a lot to journey with, um, and get
Ah,
like more information, like they use it for dream work and
yeah.
uh,
I've used that in ritual before, kind of at couple Samhain rituals of burning mugwort, and it's
mm.
like you say, good for trance work, but it's also medicinal. It also clears, I believe, depression and
So it's very cleansing, like, and
yeah,
people right now, I think, because it's getting dark, they're focused on the holidays, like, hey, Thanksgiving and
yeah,
solstice, we get to party, but it doesn't hurt to do a little cleanse before you do all that um, uh, feasting.
right,
So the mugwort kind of like helps kind of clear stuff out and get your digestion in a good place. I use it as a tea. Uh,
oh, and
and
what does it taste like in a tea?
it's a little bit bitter, and a lot of things that are bitter are really good for your liver and your digestion and kind of cleansing. So, I just put like a teaspoon, and I put other things like cinnamon and other things, so it tastes nicer.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's more
but it'll kind of move things along in your digestion and help get you ready for that feasting
yeah.
season.
Well, I am really excited about what you do, and I really honor the way that you really integrate the plant medicine and your spirituality. So I'm just going to kind of wrap things up here with what is your website and your social media contact that people can learn a little bit more about you, Diana?
Okay, so my website is dianaverse.org. That's with one N because I know some people put two N's in Diana. Mine's just
Okay.
one. So
Okay.
dianaverse.org. And then on Instagram, it's dianaverse_plant mysteries. And
Okay.
then on Facebook, it's the Dianaverse. If you're not on Instagram, my Instagram posts go to my Facebook page, or vice versa. If you're not on Facebook, you can just check out my Instagram page
Or your website. Some people don't
or the
go
website.
on any social media.
That's true.
So wonderful. It was such a pleasure having you on the show and chatting with you. I learned a lot, and Blessed be.
Yeah, blessed be, Bridget. Thank you for inviting me. I really enjoyed talking to you today.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, I'm gonna be signing off and keep on Wiccan.